The young student sat before the renowned Kabbalist rabbi, eager to learn the deepest secrets. "Master," he asked, "teach me about the Qliphoth, the dark side of the tree of life." The rabbi's face went pale. His hands began to tremble. "Leave my house," he whispered. "Never speak that word in my presence again. Men who study those realms without proper protection don't just lose their minds, they lose their souls. And sometimes they take others with them." The student left confused. 3 years later, he understood. He had ignored the warning, studied the forbidden texts alone, and opened a door he couldn't close. Now shadow beings followed him everywhere. Now he heard voices that weren't his own. Now he knew why the rabbi had been terrified. Tonight, you'll discover what lies on the other side of sacred Kabbalah, the shadow tree, the shells of evil, the realms even angels fear to enter. The mirror that reflects darkness. Every Kabbalist learns about the tree of life, the 10 Sefirah representing divine emanations, the structure of creation itself, the map of how God's infinite light flows into finite reality. But few are taught about the Qliphoth, the 10 shells of impurity that mirror the holy Sefirah, representing everything that went wrong with creation. The Hebrew word Qliphoth means shells or husks, the discarded peels that remain after something holy has been extracted. When divine light descended to create the worlds, some vessels couldn't contain the intensity and shattered. These broken shards became the Qliphoth, fragments of holiness so corrupted by their fall that they oppose everything divine. While the tree of life represents emanation from God downward into creation, the Qliphoth represents a reverse flow, a sucking void that pulls souls downward into fragmentation, chaos, and ultimately nothingness. This isn't dualism like in other religions. Evil doesn't exist independently. It's parasitic, feeding on the absence of good, like shadows exist only where light is blocked. The 10 realms of corruption. Each holy Sefirah has a corresponding Qliphoth, a demonic parody that inverts divine qualities into destructive ones. At the top of the tree of life sits Keter, crown, pure divine will. Its Qliphotic opposite is Taumil, the twins of God, representing division, the illusion that there are 2 competing powers rather than one unified creator. This is the realm of fundamental confusion, where truth itself becomes fragmented. Descending further, Chokhmah, wisdom, is opposed by Gogil, the realm where divine wisdom is perverted into cunning, manipulation, and deceptive brilliance used for destruction rather than creation. Bina, understanding, is countered by Satariel, where discernment becomes harsh judgment without mercy, where boundaries meant to protect become prisons. The middle realms grow even more disturbing. Chesed, mercy, is inverted into Gag-Sheblah, where mercy becomes enabling evil, where compassion without wisdom allows destruction to flourish. Gevurah, severity, becomes Golachab, where righteous judgment turns into cruelty, violence, and the lust for destruction. At the lowest level, Malchut, kingdom, representing physical reality and manifestation, is opposed by Nehemoth and Lilith, the realm where material existence becomes completely divorced from spiritual purpose, where the physical world is worshipped as ultimate reality, where pleasure and sensation replace meaning. The demons who rule the shells. These aren't abstract concepts.
Kabbalistic texts name specific entities governing each Qliphoth. Samael, the venom of God, rules multiple shells as the chief of the demonic hierarchy. His consort Lilith, Adam's legendary first wife who refused submission and became demon queen, governs the lowest Qliphoth, where physical and spiritual corruption meet. Ancient texts describe these beings not as fallen angels in the Christian sense, but as forces that emerged from the breaking of the vessels, the cosmic catastrophe when divine light shattered its containers. They're fragments of holiness so distorted by their fall that they actively oppose restoration. They feed on human sin, grow stronger from moral chaos, and seek to prevent the tikkun, the cosmic repair that would end their existence. Why medieval magicians went insane? During the Middle Ages, certain Jewish mystics and some Christian occultists who obtained Kabbalistic texts attempted to use Qliphotic knowledge for magical power. The logic seemed sound. If holy names command angels, perhaps demonic names command demons. If ascending the tree of life brings enlightenment, perhaps descending the tree of knowledge brings forbidden power. They were catastrophically wrong. Historical records document Kabbalists who studied the Qliphoth and suffered complete mental breakdowns. Some claimed demons physically manifested in their homes. Others reported shadow beings following them constantly. Many committed suicide. A few murdered. The most famous case involves Rabbi Joseph de la Reina in 15th century Safed. Brilliant and righteous, he attempted to force the Messianic age by using Qliphotic names to bind Samael and prevent him from accusing Israel before God's throne. The ritual initially worked, but at the critical moment, de la Reina showed mercy to the bound demon. Samael broke free, and the rebound destroyed the rabbi. He lost his faith, his sanity, and according to legend, his soul. The protection protocols ignored. Authentic Kabbalists who must study these realms to understand evil and combat it follow strict protocols. First, years of preparation studying only the holy side. Second, immersion in Torah and mitzvot to build spiritual armor. Third, working only with an experienced master who knows the safeguards. Fourth, specific prayers and divine names that create protective barriers before even reading texts about the Qliphoth. Most importantly, never attempting to invoke or interact with Qliphotic forces. The knowledge exists for defense, not offense, to recognize evil's operations and close doors, not to open them. Those who ignore these warnings don't just risk themselves. The texts warn that improper engagement with the Qliphoth can create openings that affect entire families, communities, even nations. Why this knowledge exists? If studying the dark side is so dangerous, why does it exist in Kabbalah at all? Because you cannot fight what you don't understand. Physicians must study disease to cure it. Soldiers must understand enemy tactics to defend against them. Spiritual warriors must comprehend evil's structure to dismantle it. The Qliphoth exist as a cosmic necessity. Free will requires real alternatives. Light is only meaningful when darkness is possible. Choice only matters when both good and evil are genuine options. The shells of evil serve a purpose in God's plan, even as they oppose that plan. Understanding this paradox is itself dangerous knowledge. Tomorrow, we reveal the specific names, the protection rituals, and why some believe engaging the Qliphoth is necessary to force the Messianic age, and why that belief is itself a Qliphotic deception.
How to protect yourself from what you're about to learn. The manuscript lay on the table, its pages yellowed with age, written in Hebrew so archaic that few living scholars could read it. The collector who'd purchased it from an estate sale opened it casually, then slammed it shut, his heart racing. The first page contained a warning in blood-red ink. He who reads these names without protection invites their attention. Prepare or perish. He dismissed it as theatrical nonsense and continued reading. That night, he awoke to find his bedroom filled with a presence so malevolent he couldn't breathe. The shadows moved independently of any light source. Something whispered his name. He burned the book the next morning and spent a year in therapy, but the presence never fully left. Now you'll learn what that book contained, and more importantly, how to engage this knowledge without being destroyed by it. The hierarchy of demons. The Qliphoth operates as a structured hierarchy mirroring the angelic realms. At the top sits Samael, whose name means venom of God or blindness of God, representing the principle that obscures divine truth. He isn't Satan in the Christian sense. He's the chief prosecutor, the force that tests humanity by presenting evil as attractive, that makes sin look like wisdom. Beside him rules Lilith, the night demon queen. Kabbalistic texts describe her as Adam's first wife, created equally from earth, who refused subordination and fled Eden. Transformed by her rebellion, she became the mother of demons, the seductress who kills newborns, the force that perverts sexuality from sacred union into destructive obsession. Beneath these chiefs exist 10 demon kings, each governing one Qliphoth. Kimetiel rules Thaumiel through division and confusion. Belial governs Gogiel through false wisdom and manipulation. Luciferge commands Satariel through concealment and restriction perverted into oppression. Each name carries power. Speaking them without protection is like broadcasting a signal to forces that notice and respond. The forbidding names and their dangers. Traditional Kabbalah teaches that Hebrew letters and names contain creative power. God spoke and worlds came into being. Angels obey divine names, but this principle works in reverse through the Qliphoth. Demonic names, when spoken, create connections to the forces they represent. The name Asmodeus opens pathways to lust and violent passion. Naama invites seduction and the perversion of pleasure. Tubal-Cain connects to violence and warfare. Medieval grimoires contain elaborate rituals for invoking these entities, promising power, wealth, and hidden knowledge. What they don't mention is the price. Every invocation strengthens the Qliphotic shell, feeds the demon, and creates karmic death that spans lifetimes. Rabbi Isaac Luria, the greatest Kabbalist of Safed, taught that when you speak a demon's name with intention, you literally give it a portion of your life force. You create a bond. The demon gains influence over your thoughts, impulses, and circumstances. Breaking this bond requires intense spiritual work, fasting, immersion in Torah, ritual purification, and even then, traces remain. The protection protocols. Authentic Kabbalists, who must study these realms for defensive purposes, follow precise protocols. First, never study alone. Always work with an experienced master who knows the protective measures. Second, never study at night. The Qliphoth gains strength after sunset, especially between midnight and dawn. Daylight provides natural protection. Third, create a sacred space before opening any text mentioning the Qliphoth. Recite Psalm 91, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High," which creates a barrier against malevolent forces.
Invoke the 42-letter name of God, the most powerful protective formula in Kabbalah. Visualize yourself surrounded by divine light so bright that shadows cannot exist within it. Fourth, never speak the demonic names aloud, even when reading. The ancient texts use abbreviations or code words for this reason. Speaking the name completes a circuit, like dialing a phone number. Something on the other end might answer. Fifth, ritual purification afterward. Immerse in a mikveh to wash away any spiritual contamination. Some traditions require burning the clothes worn during study. At minimum, thorough hand-washing with specific intentions and blessings. The purpose of confronting darkness. Why engage with this knowledge at all? Because ignorance doesn't protect, it makes you vulnerable. Modern spiritual seekers dabble in practices without understanding their Qliphotic connections. New Age rituals often invoke entities whose true nature is concealed. Occult groups promise enlightenment while actually opening doors to shells of impurity. Understanding the Qliphoth allows you to recognize when you're being influenced by these forces. That persistent thought pattern that justifies cruelty as necessary, that's golachab, the Qliphoth of perverted severity. The seductive voice that says pleasure without consequences is possible, that's Lilith's influence. The confusion that makes truth seem relative and contradictory, that's Thaumiel. The Baal Shem Tov taught that demons have no independent existence. They're sustained entirely by human sin and spiritual confusion. Stop feeding them through immoral choices, and they starve. Increase holiness, and they weaken. This is why the ultimate protection isn't complex ritual, but simple righteousness, prayer, Torah study, acts of kindness, ethical living. The Messianic deception. Some Kabbalistic circles believe that engaging the Qliphoth directly is necessary to force the Messianic age. The logic: extract the trapped sparks of holiness from the shells, starve the demons completely, and trigger the final redemption. This was Rabbi Joseph de Lorena's fatal error. But the Arizal warned this is itself a Qliphotic deception, pride disguised as righteousness, the belief that humans can force God's hand. The shells whisper that you're special, chosen, powerful enough to succeed where others failed. This is Samael's specialty, making damnation look like salvation. The authentic path is elevation, not confrontation. Raise yourself through holiness, and the Qliphoth naturally weaken beneath you. You don't defeat darkness by wrestling with it. You defeat it by increasing light until shadows have nowhere to exist. The final warning. If you've read this far, you now possess dangerous knowledge. Some of you will ignore the warnings and attempt to engage these forces directly, believing you're protected by good intentions or intellectual curiosity. You're not. The Qliphoth are patient and subtle. They don't usually attack immediately. They wait, building influence slowly until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Others will dismiss this as superstition, which is equally dangerous. Disbelief doesn't protect you from forces that exist, whether you acknowledge them or not. The Qliphoth feed on both arrogant engagement and ignorant dismissal.